What's going on, 70s Biggers? It's Souza here, and it's Super Bowl Sunday. My team, the Patriots, I'm hearing the boos. We're back in it this year, and to celebrate, I'm going to be smoking a brisket. So figured I'd shoot a quick video, let you guys know how it goes, give you guys some tips, maybe help you out if you're trying it for the first time. And so I got the ingredients here. I got my brisket, picked this up from Restaurant Depot, about a 13-pounder. We've got the rub for it. This is from Meat Church. It's called Holy Cow. It's basically a pretty standard Texas-style rub for a brisket, nice and peppery. I'm also going to be doing some Kansas City-style burnt ends at the end. So I'm going to be using this Holy Gospel rub from Meat Church for those. And then also for the burnt ends, I'm going to be using some of the Stubbs, just original barbecue sauce. It's pretty much my standard barbecue sauce that I stock in the house. So I'm going to run through it. I'm going to trim this bad boy down in just a minute and then hit it up with the rub and put it in the barrel, smoke it for, the way my barrel cooks, it's probably only take about 7 hours. Cooks pretty fast, but still comes out real good. So stick around and hopefully you can pick up some tips from me. All right, everyone. I'm just going to trim this thing up now. A couple little things just to note. I'm wearing these blue nitrile gloves. These things are pretty clutch. You can get a box of these at Restaurant Depot for like $5, and they just make it much easier when you're handling meat. Also, if you're ever cooking with chili peppers, things like that get hot, you don't want them in your eye or on your junk. Great to wear these. You can just take them off, throw them in the trash. You don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to trim this thing up. I'm going to use a 6-inch boning knife. Again, you can get these things pretty cheap too off Amazon for like $10-12. Don't need to spend a ton of money on these. Just keep them sharp. They'll do the job for you. I like to trim it when it comes right out of the fridge so that the fat's still a little bit cold. Makes it easier to cut. And one thing you'll probably notice is I'm pretty aggressive in my trimming. And basically I just got that when I was trying to learn. I had to teach myself. There's nobody really in New England around to really hand down barbecue tradition. So I just learned from watching videos. And really Aaron Franklin was the guy who I watched the most. And he's an aggressive trimmer. So that's where I got that from. So you might cringe a little bit with how much waste I end up throwing away, but that's how I do it. So part of the reason I trim the way I do is when I'm smoking this, I like to create a nice bark, and a lot of times the fat that's on the outside, when you create a nice bark, it'll just end up just pulling away. You won't get a nice bite of it. That's really more of a concern with pulled pork. I'm a very aggressive trimmer with my pork butts for that reason, but I find that it also is true with brisket to a degree. And so what I like to do though is get rid of some of the kind of just the grody looking stuff that's on the outsides. Just make it so you reveal nice, some of the nice marbling and all that. And once I've got the sides cleaned up to where I like it, then I'll start attacking this fat cap, and then I'm going to flip it and I'll attack the bottom a bit more. What I like to do, so this actually isn't too bad right here. I like to get the fat cap so it's maybe a 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, somewhere around there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going after the sides here where I see it's a little bit thicker. One thing also to note, if you're new to this, is a full brisket, which this is a full brisket, also referred to as a Packer brisket. It's actually got two parts to it. There's the flat, which is the leaner end down here, and then there's a big chunk of fat that rolls along here, and at the end here, sitting on top of that fat, is the point, and that's the really fatty end of the brisket. That's what we're going to use for the burn ends later on in the cook. as you can see, I'm just going to continue to trim some of this fat off of the flat. I caught myself a little with the blade. I am not a trained cook by any means, so if you want to mock my knife skills, 100% feel free. I've got a lot of just kind of really hard fat up here on top of the point that I'm gonna trim down. Like I said, I'm an aggressive trimmer, so you can actually see I've revealed a little bit of the meat here as I'm trimming the fat. I try not to do that, but because I go hard when it's time to trim the fat. I think that's what the kids say. Occasionally that happens. So this is probably not the most exciting video you've ever watched at this point, but hopefully it helps some of you if you're trying this at home and you're a little bit intimidated. Grabbing a like $50 or so cut of meat, whatever you might spend on it. All right, I'm feeling pretty good about the top here. I do have a little bit of OCD type tendencies, so sometimes I try to get a little too perfect. Now I'm just gonna go over to the back here, and you know, you can't tell this when you're buying it, but if you look here, it's got a little bit of a slit here. Oh, got myself good. So as I was saying, you can't tell when you're buying it and it's in the package, but we've got this kind of slice area looking thing. So I'm actually going to kind of trim that down as best I can. The reason being is I don't want that to fill up with rub and then not really get a good crust on it as I'm smoking. So unfortunately I'm going to have to trim a decent amount off there. But there's a little bit that I would have wanted to trim off anyway right here. So not the end of the world. All right, then there's some of this hard fat here that doesn't really render down very well. So I'm gonna really take that out. You can tell when it's the fat you want because it tends to be a little bit softer. So I'm gonna get as much of that out as I can. Again, some of this stuff that's kind of folds, I'm just gonna trim right off. I want to get, got some hard fat right there. So again, this is a little bit more of an art than a science. Everyone's gonna have their own way. You might be laughing at me right now, telling me I'm an idiot. Look at all this meat that I'm wasting. Part of the reason for the waste is we don't have a meat grinder or sausage maker kind of deal yet. That's something we're gonna get in the future, hopefully. And then some of this waste we can actually use. All right, let's see. A little bit of gnarly stuff on the edge here. I'm gonna come up, get off. Like I said, I sometimes go a little overboard here, trying to get it just so you don't necessarily have to be as particular as I am. But there's a weird part of me that likes to try to trim it so it's fairly aerodynamic looking, which I don't know if that makes any sense to do, but it's what I do. Let's see, I'm just trimming some of this fat off. You'll see on the bottom, you'll probably see some silver skin. It's not that bad. You don't really have to worry about it too much if you don't want to, or you can spend a lot of time trying to get it all off. I'll take a little off here and there, but I don't go on that. Okay. And we are just about done with the trimming. Just taking a look. I think I might take a little bit more of this hard fat off right here. All right, I think we got ourselves a pretty well trimmed piece of meat. All right, so one other tip. So when you're slicing brisket, you always want to slice it against the grain. What can happen is when you put on your rub and you get a nice bark going, it gets hard to see the grain itself. So one little thing that I'll do, and again, if I had a sausage maker or whatever, this would be great to use for that, but I'll actually cut just a piece against the grain off right now, so that when it's done, it's kind of like my little cheater section, and I can tell, like, all right, I want to do my slices this way. So just a little something I picked up in videos I've watched. All right, so now that we've got that all trimmed up, I'm going to take off my right glove and I'm going to grab my rub. And I go pretty liberally with it. Again, I like to form a nice bark, and so just sprinkle it on. One thing you'll notice is I don't use any kind of a lather or anything. I know, I think Gant did a brisket video in the past. He uses a mustard base for his lather. I use mustard on my pork butts, it's pretty good. But for myself, for my briskets, I personally prefer to just go with a nice peppery rub. Gets me the flavor I want. But it's all personal preference. So, and I'll always defer to Gant, where he is a true Texan and I am just a Yank. So feel free again to mock anything I am doing. I do put beans in my chili, so I'm sure I just lost a whole lot of credit with a lot of you. All right, I like to make sure as I'm getting the rub on, I like to make sure that I coat all the sides. I make a good mess with the rub as I'm doing it. So there's the fatty side. And I like to stand the bottle of rub up every so often to shake it. The different size granules of the spices, some will start to settle. You'll notice you won't get as many of the black peppers. So I'm just going to keep doing this until I feel like I got a good amount of rub on there. Like I said, I'm pretty aggressive with this. I like my brisket with a real peppery kick. So I may use a bit more than you go for. But again, it's all about what your taste is. So let's see here. Get these sides going. All right. Front end here. I guess you could actually say I'm a bit reckless with the rub. I'm a dad, I'm allowed to make bad jokes, so. All right, just about there. And I think we're pretty good. I'm gonna let this thing sit while I get my barrel going. And once the barrel's lit up to temperature, I'm just gonna throw it right on. And from there, it's just a waiting game. All right, we're back. The barrel is up to temp now. So I'm just gonna show you real quick, simple process of putting a brisket on. So I'll pop the cover, Grab your brisket. Put it on the grate, a little sizzle. Put it right back on, and that's it. And now we're gonna wait a few hours. I'm gonna monitor the temp, and when the flat gets up around in the 190s, the point should be in the 180s. I'm gonna separate them, wrap the flat, and then I'm gonna cube up the point, put it in a aluminum pan with some extra rub, some barbecue sauce, let that smoke for a little while longer, make those nice KC style burn ends, and we'll be ready to eat. All right, so got the brisket, got the flat up around 190 some odd degrees. I'm gonna pull it, and let's see this right now. There we go. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna separate the point and the flat. And the way I'm gonna do that is there should be, like I said earlier, there's a little bit of fat, and if I find it just right, the knife should just slide easily right through like it just did, and there we go. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the point off, put the flat and some tin foil. I'm going to wrap that up and let that rest for just a little while. Alright, wrapped up nice and snug. And what I'm going to do real quick now is I'm going to cube up this flat, or the point rather. So we got a bunch of cubed up ends. I'm going to take this Holy Gospel barbecue rub that I got, sprinkle some of that on top. I'll mix it up. Alright. And then, whoop. I'm going to take our stubs, we can open it, drizzle some of this in there, mix it up again, give it a little coating on these, alright, and pop it right back in the smoker, get that lid on there. And we're good. All right, so I sliced up the brisket. You can see it here. Again, this is just the flat. Still got the burn ends going in the smoker. And here is the finished product of the Kansas City style burn ends.